Hey everyone, this is Cash. I'm back with another educational vlog on an exciting public policy tool, corporatization. The target audience for this vlog are young and less experienced boys and girls around the world who work in the implementation of this government policy tool. This presentation will help you understand the fundamentals of corporatization programs, why do they cause negative perceptions among general public, and what can be done better to execute such programs. This presentation will run for under half an hour, and each segment is marked with timestamp on the first slide. Throughout the history, the public sector is generally known as an inferior provider of goods and services, especially when compared with the private sector. To justify this argument, the private sector proponents mention stifling political interference, bureaucracy, weaker internal controls, lower managerial accountability, poor cost management, underutilization of invested assets or resources, insufficient controls over manpower, lack of motivation to improve and change. To address these deficiencies, governments have tried many institutional frameworks to improve the public services. And one of them is by creation of a hybrid organization which is owned by government but managed like a private business. The process to create this hybrid organization is called corporatization. In the historic context, the concept and practice of public ownership and private management, or the creation of arm's length state-owned enterprises, are as old as the state itself. From the time of Persian Empire, the management of public services were dominated by state enterprises with varying degree of independence from political rulers. The enterprises were run as professional entities and were renowned for their efficiencies. In the 17th century, Sweden began to structurally disaggregate the provision and production of public services. Soviets also set up approximately 750,000 arm's-length public enterprises. The Communist China, for example, also established more than 1 million similar enterprises. In the 19th century, there were also widespread experiments based on municipal socialism in Europe and in the United States. The local authorities created new public service organizations as autonomous corporations. Everything from utilities to schools to hospitals was set up as corporatized arm's-length public entities. Even in authoritarian and right-wing regime of Mussolini in Italy, created an institute for industrial reconstruction on similar principles. Similarly, Hitler in Germany built an expanded range of new state-run public services intended to improve and boost public welfare. There is no singular form of corporatization and no easy way to explain how it works or not. What deemed as a success or failure in one place or sector may be seen very differently in another country or sector. This is not to abandon any notion of shared norms or objectives, but simply to acknowledge the complexity and ambiguity around corporatization in practice. In most common forms, corporatization is the creation of fully owned and operated government entities with a degree of autonomy from government. They typically have a separate legal status from other public entities or service providers and a corporate structure and a governance similar to publicly traded private sector companies, such as with the board of directors. Based on historic experiences, corporatization has proved to be one of the most popular forms of government ownership and currently makes up the bulk of the public sector in many Western European countries. Mostly corporatized entities can be seen in water and electricity utilities, although the practice does extend to much wider range of goods and services, including airports, universities, hospitals, and transportation. Therefore, it is important to understand why governments set up these organizations and what are the benefits of these organizations. So let's look into this in some more detail. Before diving into the benefits of corporatization, it is important to first understand arm's length transaction. An arm's length transaction indicates a transaction between two independent parties in which both parties are acting in this self-interest. Both buyer and seller are independent, who possess equal bargaining power, are not under pressure or duress from the opposing party, and are acting in their own self-interest. Therefore, due to both parties acting independently and in their self-interest, an arm's length transaction is a transaction that closely matches the fair market value of the consideration. The primary objective of corporatization is to create arm's length enterprises with independent managers, responsible solely for the operation of their own immediate organization. All costs and revenues are accounted for as though it were a standalone company. This ring fencing, or agencies,, or clustering, as it is often called, is intended to create greater financial transparency, reduce political interference, and strengthen managerial accountability within relatively autonomous service entities. It can also serve to enhance the borrowing status and credit ratings of agencies, less encumbered by complex intra-governmental finances. The benefits of corporatized entities, as mentioned earlier, are very strong and convincing. But despite there remains a widespread concern and skepticism in general public about the nature and objective of these organizations. On this slide, I would like to raise some of the main concerns often received by policymakers. First, corporatization may be public in nature, but due to the term corporate, it raises conflicting and complex questions about the meaning of word public and the nature of the state in the delivery of essential services. Second, it is an alternative to privatization, a wolf in sheep's clothing, which is offering a face of a public ownership whilst progressing neoliberal agenda by propagating market ideology, advancing corporate accumulation of wealth and privatization without the political and financial risks which are associated with direct private sector investments. Third, the corporatized entities are vertical silos with protective barriers erected in the name of autonomy and operated in isolation from one another, even when they may share the same building and equipment and service the same jurisdictions. The result is a rigid and impervious organization where the management and leadership roles are often appointed on a whim, based on somebody's gut feel or because of their connections, and not on capability and merit. Fourth, under traditional and aggregated forms of welfarist public administration, infrastructure projects are typically brought together under horizontally organized public service departments. The state uses cross subsidization where revenue from one service supports non revenue generating services, such as libraries or primary healthcare. But with the advent of new liberal marketization, they have been legally and physically separated from one another, told not to waste resources on other departments, contributing to a blinkered and short term approach to service planning. Therefore, in the new system, the corporatized managers become disinclined to share resources, and the elected officials may no longer have the power to demand their transfer. Lastly, corporatized managers, like converts to religion, have tendency to adopt overly zealous market oriented styles, languages, and techniques. The trend towards performance based salaries for senior managers and other similar incentives often lead to a change in management ethos with a focus on short term financial bottom lines, creating publicly owned and operated entities behaving like private companies, mimicking business discourse and practices, and establishing systems of competition that can serve to hollow out the state. In the new environment, consumers are increasingly seen as customers instead of citizens, with services seen as commodities to be bought and sold like any other product on the market, dissociated with broader public goods and benefits. On this slide, I would like to specially go in a bit more detail about the possible challenges of privatizing public healthcare entities, which must be carefully considered and negotiated under SPNA or sale and purchase agreement. First, we must recognize that a privately owned and for profit organization have profit generation as a motive, a main motive. They are dependent on private capital and are expected to generate return on investment in the form of profits and dividends. Public critics of for profit ownership of healthcare providers highlight several downsides of the pursuit of profits. Here are some examples. First, private owners can withdraw, close, sell up hospitals and clinics purely for financial reasons without taking sufficient account of the impact on the local population and its health. Second, cherry picking the more profitable patients, that is, those requiring the lowest treatment cost relative to the price paid by payer or insurer, and deterring or turning away less profitable patients, leaving them to travel longer distances to obtain care at other providers. Third, supplier-induced demand system if payment for services is based on per unit of service or activity delivered. Fourth, shifting of cost onto patients and their carers for the use of ancillary services like television, telephones, and the use of car parks for visitors and outpatients. Fifth, gives motivation to seek higher profits by employing lower quality of staff or paying staff less or by employing fewer staff and making them cover larger set of responsibilities. Sixth, a disincentive to incur cost which support investment in community projects to improve disease prevention and education. In previous slides, we have looked into some detail the issues and concerns with regard to the corporatization and privatization arrangements. The question now arises, what should the management can do, or what strategy the management can implement to address those concerns? Here are my 10 points which should help progressing the corporatization arrangement into more friendly institutional framework. First, the title of corporatized agencies or companies can be more public friendly and called public service vehicles, that is PSVs, or public service companies, that is PSCs. Therefore, from the outset, it is clear the idea of these entities is public benefit. Second, the program management should ensure that level of service, quality, and pricing is fair and impartial to different social groups. Third, ensure that services are provided in financially efficient manner and long-term future is not compromised by underinvestment or aggressive cost cutting. Fourth, ensure that the overall quality of service is improving. Fifth, through legal or formal arrangements, the service providers be made accountable to general public. Sixth, the operating mandates and service delivery decisions of the providers should be communicated to general public in regular and transparent manner. Seventh, the human resources are hired purely on merit and on capability basis at fair salaries and in adequate numbers to meet workplace demand. Eighth, ensure the model is financially and politically sustainable by demonstrating sufficient financial resources for the continuity of service and support for the new entity at different levels of government. Ninth, invest in coaching and mentoring programs for young and less experienced staff members to understand their ambitions, motivations, and help them build a better future. Show the public you care. 10th, monitor and control flow of all communications to avoid rumors and negative media coverage in public domain. We have almost reached the end of this vlog, and I would like to summarize the key observations and recommendations now. Corporatization has deep roots in the history of public services, development, and their management. Corporatization is increasingly seen as a safe way to deliver public services. Corporatization contributes to greater financial and managerial transparency, which can help with the provision of equitable and affordable services for all. Corporatized entities can make it easier to raise capital domestically and internationally. Corporatization arrangements should be designed so they enhance equity, transparency, accountability, public ethos with performance metrics, and must be evaluated regularly. Publicness of purpose should be central to decision making, with strong checks and balances on overzealous commercial decision making. Corporatization is about erecting financial and managerial walls, but must understand that ring fencing is only effective if there are doors and windows that encourage cooperation, communication, and promote holistic planning. Corporatization arrangements be promoted and called public sector companies or public service vehicles. Appointments of leadership and management should be based on competence and merit with mix of people from private and public sectors. Management should never lose sight of fair and impartial service provision, financial efficiencies, and quality improvements. Management is made accountable to general public and disclose mandates and policy decisions to general public in transparent manner. Set up coaching and mentoring programs to understand human resources better and to develop them for our better present and future. Thank you for listening.